Say you have around $70,000 to $80,000 to spend on a driver-focused EV. Do you go for a brand new rear-wheel drive Lucid Air Pure, or do you go for a used Porsche Taycan 4S that's all-wheel drive and more powerful? That's the question I'm going to try to answer today. We're currently sitting in a 2022 Porsche Taycan 4S. This particular car had an MSRP of around $160,000 US. Now it has depreciated by more than 50%, probably close to 60%. I've seen examples of the 2021 to 2023 Taycan 4S on the used market for anywhere from $55,000 to $70,000. Whereas a brand new Lucid Air Pure starts at around $71,000, that particular example was spec'd out to $75,000. So for about the same money, which is the better driver-focused EV sedan? So the Taycan 4S has dual motors, one on the front axle, one on the rear, and they produce a combined 523 horsepower and 472 pound-feet of peak output with a continuous 429 horsepower. That's if you fit it with a 79.2 kilowatt hour battery. If you get the 93 kilowatt hour battery, those numbers jump up to 563 horsepower, 479 pound-feet of peak output with a continuous 483 horsepower. If you were to go for a 2025 model year, you get a bump in both battery capacity and power output. This has a pretty interesting drivetrain setup. We have a 1-speed direct drive on the front axle, but the rear axle gets a 2-speed automatic transmission with a limited slip differential. This car weighs around 4,800 pounds. EPA estimated range is not great by 2025 standards, either 227 miles or 199 miles, depending on which battery size you go for. However, this is a very quick car, 0 to 60 in 3.5 seconds. Also very sophisticated suspension setup, double wishbone front, multi-link rear with adaptive dampers. But here's the crazy part. As I mentioned earlier, this car has depreciated so far, but back when this car was new, you could pick these up at a starting MSRP of $105,000 for a 4S. That means this car has over 50 grand in options, and more than that 50 grand has now been depreciated after just 3 or 4 years. The owner, Nate, said that, you know, it's not ideal, but he does really enjoy driving this car. First impressions of the interior, it's typical Porsche, extremely high quality, aesthetically very pleasing. Nothing here is gaudy. Even the piano black implementation here is pretty nice. We do have a power button, kind of for nostalgia purposes, I guess. So you can turn the car off, but when you first enter the car, it actually just turns on. All the displays here are fully digital. One for your cluster, it's very wide. It's sculpted so that you have a pretty decent view through the steering wheel, although there is a little bit of a blind spot depending on how high or low you like your steering wheel and how in or out you like it to be. But overall, they have designed these digital buttons and gauges to be visible even when you have the steering wheel in a pretty normal position. All your AC controls are down here, unfortunately, as are your volume controls. It does give you actual physical feedback though when you click the screen, which is great. Makes it easier to operate when you're driving around and you don't necessarily want to take your eyes off the road for more than a split second. In terms of drive modes, we're going to put this into sport. This does not have the sport chrono package, which gives you additional adjustment, but we do have adaptive dampers, so we'll have this in sport. Actually, let's go Sport Plus. And then for chassis height, this automatically drops it to low. We'll have regen braking on, and we'll have the electric sport sound on, which apparently just uses a microphone on the electric motor to just amplify the sound into the cabin, which is pretty cool. The gear lever is right here, so we have it in drive. There's a little bit of a whir as you set away. We're on Pirelli P0 tires, 265 in the front, 305 in the back. Oh yeah, that's quick. That is quick. Right around 500 horsepower in a 4,800 pound car is no joke. Wow, the body control of this car is amazingly good for such a heavy curb weight. Oh wow. It gets up to speed very quickly, but it also has amazing brake feel. Steer by wire, brake by wire, drive by wire, but it all feels natural, very natural. Excellent weighting in the steering. It's not overly sensitive in terms of the quickness. It just feels like a Porsche without that flat six howl behind your head. Wow, this corner is so flat. I can feel that low center of gravity helping me here. Very little wind and tire noise. It's kind of eerie how capable this is while also being dead silent other than the electric sport sound. Very, very precise front end. I can place the front tires with pinpoint accuracy. Try doing that in any non-EV 4,800 pound car and you will struggle, to say the least. All right, let's try launch control real quick. Okay, so this is nowhere near as insane off the line as the Tesla Model S Plaid that I reviewed last year. That car is way more break your neck speed when you put your foot down. So is the Model 3 Performance, by the way. This Taycan 4S does feel like a step down in terms of acceleration, but the chassis control and the calibration of all the driver controls, the inputs, far superior than anything I've driven from Tesla. This has superior body control by far. Even in Sport Plus, the suspension is soaking up all the bumps while keeping the car flat in the corners. The brakes here feel so much better than Tesla's. The pedal feel is really great. So much modulation in that pedal. Oh yeah. This is so easy to drive quickly. I do feel the weight when I'm braking deep into the corners though. You can't really get around 4,800 pounds even with that low center of gravity, but outside of those really deep late braking scenarios, like right there, this car feels insane. There is virtually no learning curve to driving this car quickly. It's so easy. It's effortless. Oh man. It's a bummer that these only have around 200 to 220-ish miles of range, depending on which battery you go for, and obviously that's going to be with depleting the battery from 100% to 0. If you actually own an EV, you're probably not going to want to charge it above 80 or 85% to maintain that battery longevity. So realistically, you got maybe 150 to 180 miles of range. That is really not very good. Not very good at all. That's about half the EPA rated range for that Lucid Air Pure we're about to drive. So I guess the question is, are the driving dynamics of this just so far beyond the Lucid that you should still go for this? A used Taycan 4S. I mean, from behind the wheel right now, I just can't fathom how that Lucid would be able to match this. Porsche has so much history in dialing in steering, throttle, brake, suspension calibrations. Lucid's the new kid on the block, relatively speaking, and even though they have a lot of engineering prowess from their teams who have experience at more traditional performance car companies, how is that going to translate to essentially their first real product? I think from all the EVs I've driven, this Taycan 4S is by far the most impressive dynamically. And now we can just take it out of sport mode. The steering gets lighter, the suspension's a bit softer. Although even in Sport Plus, like I said, the suspension's very compliant. What a car. It's crazy how poorly these depreciate, but at the same time, it makes you wonder, is getting a used Taycan the way to go right now? If the limited range is not a deal breaker for you, I would argue this is one of the best driving vehicles that can still seat 4 comfortably for less than $70,000. And this build quality is impeccable. Basically no squeaks and rattles, it just feels so solid. It's time to hop into the Lucid Air Pure and see if it even stands a chance at being as dynamically capable and fun to drive, frankly, as this used Taycan 4S. All right, we're now in the 2025 Lucid Air Pure. MSRP starts at 71. This particular car is 75. It has some upgraded wheels. First impressions of the interior, just because I've never even sat in a Lucid before, it's very interesting. There's a lot of this kind of cloth material that makes it feel a bit more modern, a bit more hip than the Porsche, which has a more standard design to it. Every Porsche product that you get into nowadays feels very much the same in terms of the materials and the overall styling and aesthetic of the interior. This is very different. Like, look at this styling of this steering wheel. We have these knobs that kind of stick out from the 9 and 3 spokes. And then you have this strip along here with buttons on the left and right. It's very unique. It gives this car its own personal flair. I will say though, ergonomically, one thing I'm not loving is that they did not do what Porsche did with their digital cluster, where they placed the buttons strategically to not be blocked by the steering wheel, because here, I can't really see my high beams that well, my windshield wipers, and then on the right side, I can't really see the home, navigation, music, and phone buttons without moving my head. Probably not a huge deal once you kind of just know where everything is, but ergonomically, it's just not as good as the Porsche in that regard. Thankfully, we still have physical controls for climate. And I will say, I really like how this screen looks. It almost looks like e-paper. Like if you remember the Amazon Kindle, it kind of looks like a color version of that. Really good contrast, but at the same time, it's low glare. The key is also very interesting. It's this very lightweight, almost boomerang shaped design. And there's a button in the middle that you wouldn't really know unless you played with it, but you do feel an indent when you press the middle of this key. Interior packaging of this car, I will give it that. It is amazing. The rear seat has so much legroom. It feels like an S-Class back there, significantly more than the Taycan. And there's actually a usable middle seat in the back as well. The Taycan, of course, is a 4-seater. The steering wheel does have a much thicker rim. It doesn't fit in the hand as well. It doesn't feel like a driver's car steering wheel. But overall, the interior of this car does have a really nice, unique look. Even just how this digital cluster looks like it's floating is so cool. But in terms of specs, this is powered by a single electric motor on the rear axle. It makes 430 horsepower and 406 pound-feet of torque. This has a larger battery than the Taycan 4S at 88 kilowatt hours. At least it's larger than the base battery in the Taycan 4S. This has much better range, 420 miles. This is direct drive, and there's no LSD. This uses torque vectoring by braking and the traction control system to help this car stay planted in the corners. 0 to 60 is much slower, 4.5 seconds versus 3.5 for the Taycan 4S. And we've got multi-link front and rear suspension here, whereas the Taycan has double wishbone front, multi-link rear. In terms of drive modes, let's put this right into sprint, and we'll turn regen braking on low. Interestingly, I had regen braking or recuperation on in the 4S, but I didn't really feel it at all. But in this car, it's much more prominent. Now, one thing I'm noticing is that the AC in this car, you just get this cool breeze of air without even hearing the fans. It's very refined. Yeah, not nearly as quick as the 4S, but still more than quick enough. Something's rolling around over there. Let's just ignore that. But first thing I'm noticing, this suspension is more supple. It's softer. It's more compliant. But at the same time, it doesn't have the body control of the 4S. The brake feel also isn't quite as good. 4S brake pedal isn't perfect either. Like I said, going deep into corners, you do get a little bit of a soft, mushy feel, but this brake pedal just kind of feels soft and mushy everywhere. Oh wow, yeah, there's a little bit of a slip at that rear axle when you get on the power in the corners. It's nice. You just feel it helping you rotate. This steering rack, though, doesn't feel nearly as precise. It has this lightness off center that doesn't inspire as much confidence. That 4S steering rack, even though it doesn't have a ton of feedback about the road surface, you just feel like you can very precisely place the front end. This one feels a bit wallowy. Also, the steering wheel is larger in diameter, this thicker rim, and it just doesn't feel as good in the hand. And I'm not sure if this is just because this car is lower mileage, a little over 8,000, whereas that used 4S had around 30,000. But fewer squeaks and rattles. The Taycan 4S was mostly solid feeling, but just that little bit of like panel rattling, very subtle, but I could hear it. This one just feels rock solid. Let's try quick launch. I don't know if I did that right, but that definitely did not feel like a proper launch control. Ooh, yeah. I love how this car feels like it's being driven by the rear axle, which of course it is, but you don't quite get that sensation in the 4S. The 4S just has grip and traction everywhere, whereas this, you do feel a little bit more playfulness. Oh, this brake pedal though, it's a little bit springy. The body control here is still very good, but again, not as dialed as the 4S with its adaptive dampers. This, I'm sure, would be better for daily driving and just overall ride comfort. These seats, super comfortable. I feel like the back cushioning or padding, it just contours perfectly to my spine. My lower back in this car just feels really, really unstressed, if that makes sense. Okay, so when you breach the limits of the rear tire grip here, you can tell that the engineers, the chassis dynamics folks over at Lucid, designed this to be a playful sedan. You can actually get this to rotate on throttle, which is a great feeling. And I gotta say, when I'm just cruising around normal speed, this is so refined, so comfortable. I do get a little bit of a glare from the back of this digital screen on the windshield when the sun hits it just right. Something I thought I'd point out because at first I thought it was a windshield crack. I am getting into a groove with this car now, and I gotta say, at the limit, this car is a little bit more playful than the 4S, partially because it has lower grip limits, smaller tires, only rear-wheel drive versus all-wheel drive. But when you're driving below the limit at 6/10, 7/10, the controls of the car just don't feel as dialed. The suspension, the steering, a little bit wallowy, a little bit soft. Porsche still has this beat in terms of overall driving dynamics, if backroad bombing is what you want out of your EV. But I definitely will admit that at $71,000 to $75,000, this Lucid Air does feel like the overall more refined vehicle, and the interior packaging is quite a bit better. And now if you just want to dial things back, put it into smooth drive mode, so comfortable, so quiet. This is one of the quietest cars I think I've ever driven, and one of the most supple in terms of the ride compliance. And I can't get over this AC. I didn't really notice this in the Taycan, so I can't say for sure that this is better than the Taycan. I have the fan speed up to 3, but I do not hear any air movement whatsoever. And yet there's this nice breeze of cool air just permeating the cabin. It's really something else. And look, when you put your foot down, this car is more than quick enough. It just doesn't give you that Plaid or Model 3 performance level of push you in the back of your seat. This is a lot more subdued. But let's be real, when you're buying an EV, other than using that acceleration as a party trick for your friends, how often do you really use it? Every fast EV owner that I've ever talked to say that they basically never floor their cars. There's a real use case for this Lucid Air Pure at just over $70,000. It's one of the most refined sedans I think I've ever driven. And yet at the same time, it has great driving dynamics. Not quite to the level of the Porsche Taycan, in my opinion, but still so impressive, especially when you kick the rear out. So with that said, a big shout out to the owners, Nate and Sushil. Let me know what you think of this comparison. If you want a fun to drive, everyday drivable EV sedan, would you go for a brand new Lucid Air Pure, or would you go for a used Porsche Taycan 4S or some other model? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.